Senator Bell, you also have Senate Bill 372, if you wanted to go ahead and introduce that legislation.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair and members of the committee. What this legislation does is it makes it illegal for members of law enforcement to sleep with people in their custody. This is to capture the situations where you cannot prove sexual assault under the existing standards. The argument is that in this kind of extreme power imbalance, consent cannot really be given meaningfully. So it is something that I think we should make illegal. The legislation has a number of exemptions. One of the most important ones is if there is a preponderance of the evidence that the member of law enforcement did not consent to the sexual activity, was the victim. That's very important. There was a case in Arizona in which I believe a prison guard was charged under a similar law that did not have that exemption. And there are a couple of additional exemptions. But with that, I'd be happy to take any questions about the details of the legislation.
Thank you. Are there any questions from the committee for the bill sponsor? All right, I do not see any. Thank you, Senator Bell.
Thank you so much.
So this is Senate Bill 372 by Senator Bell. We do have a couple of members of the public who've signed up to testify. If I call your name and you want to come forward to the table, we've got Bella Robinson, Stephanie Soto, and Rebecca Cleary. Welcome to the committee. If you want to go ahead and introduce yourself, let us know if you're representing a group, and just want to make sure that the button on the microphone is up when you speak. Welcome to the committee.
Hi, my name is Bella Robinson, and I'm the Executive Director of COYOTE RI. We are a group of sex workers, trafficking victims that advocate for policies that promote public safety. And I am here in support of two bills. I'll make it real quick because they're combined. But I am here in support of 372. This is the fourth year the bill's been in the committee. At the beginning, I'm also here asking for 402 to be amended. Earlier in the year, I emailed this report to every member of the General Assembly that we spent $8,000 getting charging documents. So our problems with 402 is they're excluding massage without a license. In our report, 13 out of the 16 cases were massage women. We also found 55 incidents of police officers engaging in sexual contact during vice stings that particularly happened to women of color and Asian women. And for those reasons, we hope that you're willing to learn more about this in the future and read the report that we know they have good intentions. Or second thing that we think is wrong with 402, they don't list what crimes we would comport. We're not trying to make snitches out of people. We want people to report violent crimes, crimes against people, and our bill in the House 6064 actually lists what crimes: child porn, trafficking, robbery, rape, bad things with bad people. And it only gives immunity for reporting the crime to misdemeanors. And I want to give you a quick example. If a grown man went to a hotel to see an escort that was my age and she turned out to be 14, you want him to call the police, and we don't have payphones. There's no way to make anonymous calls. We believe this bill will help protect victims, sex workers, and make our community safer. And I'd be glad to take any questions you have. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions from the committee for this witness? All right, I do not see any. Thank you for your testimony. Welcome to the committee, and if you want to go ahead and introduce yourself, you can go ahead with your testimony.
Hi, my name is Rebecca Cleary. Thank you so much for your time today. I am a staff attorney at Decriminalize Sex Work, which is a national policy organization, and we work state by state to advance legislation to improve the health and safety, well-being, and rights of sex workers and trafficking survivors. So my role, first of all, at DSW is that I track certain kinds of legislation across the country where things have been passed, where things are pending. And one of the things I've been looking at a lot lately, I just finished a lot of research and reporting on this, is custodial sexual assault bills and more generally police sexual violence bills. And so what I found is that Rhode Island is one of only 6 states in the entire country that doesn't have a law related to custodial sexual assault. So that on its own, I think, shows that there's a necessity for this bill, or at least in most of the rest of the country they've found that. In fact, last year, the federal government finally passed a custodial sexual assault law that's federal, but it also created federal funding for states that have custodial sexual assault laws. And so the reason why this is necessary beyond existing sexual assault laws, obviously it's already illegal to sexually assault someone, is obviously if someone is victimized by a police officer, they're not going to be comfortable reporting that victimization to the very body that victimized them in the first place. Beyond that, they might fear retaliation. They might fear that they won't be believed. They might fear that the person who assaulted them will claim that it was consensual, and obviously that person will be seen as, a police officer is going to be seen as more credible. And this isn't just an issue that affects sex workers and trafficked people. That might be my approach because of my job, but it's obviously anyone who is having contact with a law enforcement officer, this is a situation that is possible. That's even been recognized by the International Association of Chiefs of Police. They released, what is it called? The Executive Guide for Addressing Sexual Offenses and Misconduct by Law Enforcement. This was in 2011. And I have a very brief snippet, a quote from that about police sexual violence, where they said, predators select victims based on vulnerabilities and a perceived lack of credibility, and therefore victimization is often higher among certain populations. They go on to list a number of marginalized groups who are more subject to police coercion and just police interaction generally, and they even included specifically individuals in prostitution and or the commercial sex industry. So that's my approach to this. But obviously this is a much broader issue. Police have an amount of authority that makes it they have more ability to coerce potential victims. You know, you can say, you do this, or I'll arrest you. And obviously someone, you know, may say, fine, I'll do it, which is spoken consent, but I think we're well past the stage where I have to explain that that's not consent because there's coercion involved. So ultimately, I mean, I find it almost surprising that there are still 6 states that don't have laws, and I find it like especially surprising that Rhode Island wouldn't have this. I mean, it is, we do have sexual assault laws, there are sexual assault laws, but it is a loophole that's being closed everywhere and now incentivized by the federal government. So, sorry, that was a lot of words at once. Feel free to ask me any questions.
Thank you for your testimony. Senator Lombardi.
I'm a little surprised as well. Last year, Senator Leader De La Cruz and I passed some legislation in direct response to the North Kingston situation involving a teacher and their positions of authority over children. And in that case, it was a little easier because we're dealing with 14 to 16-year-olds who arguably could not consent, as we put that word in quotes. But I'm surprised to see that this bill, that we don't have such a bill on the record, especially when the ultimate act of authority, a peace officer. It's rather surprising to me.
Yeah, I mean, when I first began this research, before I was, working on, or not directly working on this bill, before I was aware of this bill, I came and testified last year as well. I was very surprised to see any states had none of it. I mean, it's a relatively recent thing because there were a number of well-publicized cases. There was one really well-known case in New York that kind of set a trend. Some places have had it for a long time, but a lot of these laws are like within the last decade, 15 years or so. And a lot of them were also in response to maybe local instances that made the news. So I think it's just kind of one of those things that didn't become enough of a priority in the session.
Thank you.
But it should be.
Thank you. Are there any other questions or comments for this witness? All right, I do not see any. And then the only other person we had signed up was Stephanie Soto. If Stephanie is here and would like to testify. Okay, is there anyone else who would like to testify on this legislation? Harrison, come on up. If you want to go ahead and introduce yourself to the committee, and you can go ahead.
Thank you so much, Madam Chairwoman Oyer and the rest of the committee for having me today to testify in support of this legislation. A lot of the same talking points that our previous person had stated is true. And I would like to say that the people that we found that are most impacted by custodial sexual assault are women of color. And so we kind of go back to the fact of who our marginalized communities are. We know that women of color historically have been, unfortunately, victims of sexual assault and other forms of oppression. And so it's really important that we close this gap. And I'd happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Are there any questions for this witness? All right, I don't see any questions, and there's no one else signed up to testify. With that, I'd entertain a motion to hold Senate Bill 372, made by Senator Lombardi, seconded by Senator Burke. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? And Senate Bill 372 is held.